Nope.
Which was the hardest?
Christine.
Christine, why? The third wife. Christine was the third wife.
Yeah.
I was the third wife.
Why was that? Why was Christine the hardest?
Emotionally for me, so it was easier for me to accept. His with Christine, I perceived as much more romantic. He cared about her much more, so I felt threatened.
But
Good morning, besties. Okay, today is September 2nd. This is actually the release day of Christine Woolley's book. And her book was sold in stores last week, but today's the first day you can get the book on Kindle or on Audible if you were trying to get it in electronic format. For many of you, you know that I purchased the book, and also I now have it on my Kindle because I had pre-ordered it. So I have it in two ways. So Christine Woolley, you are welcome for my multiple purchases. But Christine's interviews, I was shocked this morning. I thought Christine would for sure be on Good Morning America or on the Today Show or on CBS Good Morning. And I was shocked because there was no morning show interview. And I was just surprised because there's been so many books on this channel that I have covered. Okay. And when the Duggar Girls released books, Jill and Ginger, both of them were on Good Morning America and on Nightline. When Gypsy Rose Blanchard wrote a book, she was on Good Morning America and Nightline. So when this book came out, I assumed she would end up on one of these morning shows, and I was shocked this morning to not see her on any of the shows. Instead, she did an interview with Sarah Fraser, and she answered a couple questions about the book, but it wasn't in depth very much. Sarah and Christine talked a little bit about, some of the meat of the book, and then talked more about the show, the 20th season, and then Cody being on Special Forces. So, and then she did a People interview, but I was truly expecting to see her on all of the outlets, just like that got saturated the same way that Jill Dillard's book was. Right? I assumed it would just be Jill's book. She's from TLC. She's left a cult. There's a high interest in these kinds of books. And so far, nothing. So I don't know if it's because she's looking for, an outlet that will be a little bit softer in their approach. She maybe wants to be at, if she were to go to a morning show, maybe they're going to ask a little bit tougher questions, might go deeper into the book than maybe she wants to discuss on an interview. I really don't know. Maybe she's concerned about contracts with TLC. I really don't know. But with the book launch this morning, I thought, well, one thing that we haven't really gone into as much is the depths of what Christine talks about in her relationship with Meri. On the show, they've said for years that there was no hierarchy, there was no head wife, there was no person that had more power, and that's definitely not the truth. And in her book, she makes clear that there was a hierarchy and Meri was at the top. And in chapter 6, she writes, sister wives aren't supposed to have any special privileges based on order of marriage, but some things are automatic, and those things can cause friction because Meri was the first wife. She had the easiest wedding, big dress, big cake, dancing photos, and that don't include extra wives. Legally, Meri and Cody were a couple. She could talk about him at work and take him to work events as her husband, and he could do the same. They had established themselves as a couple. They dated as monogamists, and during that time, they could openly kiss and laugh and snuggle. She could get crazy with a tight sweater. So Meri, because of her legal status, had clout that the rest of the wives didn't have. And then also because she was the legal wife, she had power and control over them that they didn't have. And this is something that she writes about in the book. I mean, she even writes about how when she was leaving Cody, because she had money tied up with Cody, legally speaking, anything that she owned, Robin also owned because of the way of the laws are in Arizona. And so she was really concerned about leaving because if she were to leave and Cody's name were on the home and they had other assets tied up, legally speaking, Robin could come after her for half of everything. And that made her nervous. So there are aspects where these wives that are not legal wives are at a detriment and can be absolutely mistreated because they don't have the same power or control. And so for any of the women that have been legal wives to claim that they don't have more power over the other wives is just ridiculous. And apparently that extended to the amount of clout and control Meri had within the family. When they moved to Wyoming in 1998, they shared a small 3-bedroom ranch that's like 1,300 square feet with only 3 bedrooms, and they had 10 kids in this home. Not only did they share bedrooms with their kids' ages during this period from 98, which the youngest of hers would have been 1 at that point, or just born, Peyton, to Aspen, who would have been 3 to 4, and then Logan, who would have turned 5. They lived like this for over a year, and they shared a bedroom with their kids. And she even writes that at night, we would wait until the kids were asleep and then try to keep quiet as Cody would rotate from room to room, with this implication about sex. And this is how it goes. From Sandy, we moved back to Wyoming in 1998, and that's where I had my most magical moments with the Cody Brown family. We lived in a 3-bedroom ranch-style house, which meant the kids, who were toddlers, lived in the bedrooms with their mothers. Cody rotated from room to room. We would wait until the kids were asleep and then try to keep quiet. The house was small. Janelle and I each had a bedroom off the living room by the only bathroom. Meri's bedroom was on the other side of the living room. While she had 1 child, hers was the biggest. Neither Janelle nor I wanted the other to have to share a wall with Meri because she could be difficult. So we volunteered to take the small bedrooms. That meant I shared a wall with Janelle, which was ridiculously awkward because we also shared a husband, implying that she would hear Cody and Janelle having sex in their shared room with their kids. But everything was hard, including having to share a tiny kitchen while trying to feed an enormous family. In the tiny space, Meri's rules grew even stricter. I don't care how towels are folded, they go in the drawer and they're folded. In fact, I don't care if they're folded at all as long as they end up in a drawer. We went through towels so quickly we barely had time to fold them. I don't care if kids play in Tupperware cupboards or make a mess. I don't care if they eat all the food on their plate or take 3 bites. You should have consequences for your actions, but I'm more casual with my parenting style. When we all lived together, Janelle and I, as well as our kids, followed stricter rules to keep the peace with Meri, but also because when you have so many people living with you, the kids can't be making messes all the time. She dives into the pyramid structure of the control in this family. And when they get to Lehigh, they're in the 3 separate apartments. And she writes, I debated whether to tell this part, particularly because I know we've all changed so much since those early years, but the dynamics of polygamous parenting can feel like a seesaw. And Meri, even with 1 child to care for, was the top wife in our polygamy. So I think it's interesting for her to qualify that she was the top, but then say she only had 1 child, because in polygamy, the number of children you have is also indicative of like how great you are for God. And Meri has spoken quite a bit about how she felt like she was shamed because she only had 1 child. We followed her rules when she was around to keep the peace, but her rules felt punitive and unfair. I had to make a decision about what was best for me and my family within a family, and it changed our relationship forever. And then she just shares the story about McKelty going to the store with Leon, not having enough money, asking the cashier for money, and then Leon tells Meri, and Meri's embarrassed. And she says Meri lost her mind. She was mad that McKelty had embarrassed her in front of the cashier and that she had embarrassed Leon. She yelled at McKelty, who couldn't understand what she had done wrong. I couldn't either. That was a day after a series of too many similar experiences. I ended my friendship with Meri. I've had enough, and my mama bear came roaring. Don't talk to my kids. I don't want you near them. I don't want you to come downstairs anymore. Our relationship is done. I may have been the mediator between Meri and Janelle, and I know her relationship with Cody was hard, but it wasn't fair for her to take her mess out on my kids or on me. It wasn't safe for us. Meri didn't seem to discriminate, though, about who she targeted. I used to think that maybe she targeted Christine the most because she felt the most threatened by Cody's relationship with Christine, but she also was pretty awful to Janelle. And one thing that Christine writes about consistently is that Mary was so controlling about rules and about structure and about quiet and about roughhousing and about not letting kids be kids. Like it feels like Mary had this concept of kids should be seen and not heard. And Mary has discussed being a very strict parent. So I understand that mindset. I think Mary comes from a very combative family where her dad was a bully. And I know that people are from this cult have told me about their own experiences with Mary's family and with a lot of the daughters being bullies and mean and combative and argumentative and manipulative and controlling. And, it's a learned behavior from the family she grew up in with her father. There's this lack of control Mary probably had, and so she used that to control others because she felt out of control. She's also described herself as being very meticulous and a very black and white thinker and has to have things a certain way. So, yeah, there was a lot of things that happened with Mary, but I think Mary and Christine's approaches with each other didn't really help their dynamics either. So, throughout the book, a lot of underlying resentment appears to be for Mary only having one child, right? It's mentioned numerous times when she discusses Mary, especially when in terms of the equity that Mary had and what she got, and in terms of what her kids didn't get. And I can understand that to a degree, but also Mary was the legal wife, and Christine did walk into a family that she claims she chose, and she was the third wife, and she was not a legal wife, and she had no legal standing, and she walked into a marriage and became a sticking point for Mary and Cody. It's just another obstacle for Mary and Cody, or for Mary especially. And I understand that Mary and Christine don't get along, and I understand she yelled at McKelty and did all and lost her mind. She didn't want her kids to be controlled by Mary. But then a couple sentences later, she's like, well, everything was fine when we were together after that. We weren't close. And, if we needed to do stuff with the kids, she would be there. So it's unclear how Mary really untangled herself from disciplining the kids, because a couple chapters later, she's talking about doing stuff with the kids, and Mary would always help out with the kids. So there's quite a bit of contradiction in this story, and I'm sure it's because there's contradiction in her head of trying to navigate that, what it was versus what it is, and the rose-colored glasses that she's always said that she lives in. One thing that I noticed, though, is that with Christine, her degradation, or maybe her insults of Mary, are more passive aggressive. So it's like, well, Mary only had one child and she had six. And so in polygamy, the wives that have the most kids are supposed to be the wives that are the most revered because they've brought the most blessings for their husband. But for Mary, apparently, when she would go out and they would be together, she would insult Christine to friends and family. She would insult Christine's appearance. Christine writes about how Mary would insult her intelligence, mock her, make fun of her in front of others publicly just to ridicule her. And she even writes about how later on, while the show was going on, they went on this cruise they had both qualified for LuLaRoe, and she went to go do something with Mary, and then Mary insulted her and criticized her and basically mocked her in front of her friends on this cruise, and it left her with a really sour taste in her mouth. When Christine writes about the one house that Cody proposed to them on the show, she said that part of the reason she didn't want to live in the one house was because she didn't want to live with Mary again, even if they were going to be in a separate apartment. She didn't want to have a door near Mary. She didn't want to have a shared space with Mary. She just did not want to be in the same space as Mary. She wrote this: our relationship had not improved. We both worked for the same company. She had brought me in, so we went on a cruise together. So Mary had sponsored Christine into LuLaRoe. Maddie and Audrey, Leon's partner, also went. I thought this was a chance to see if anything had changed and maybe have some fun. As my sponsor, she was supposed to introduce me around and teach me about the company, culture, and get me excited about the opportunities. And I looked forward to giving our friendship another shot. Early in the trip, Mary thought I had ignored her. I told her I hadn't seen her. Too late. For the rest of the trip, I remembered that she ignored me, snubbed me, insulted me, or hit me with little barbs in front of other people. It was bizarre, and also exactly why I had ended the friendship the first time around. Afterwards, she called me, and here's how I remember the conversation. I want to be friends, she said. Seriously? I said, no. I know, she said, but it was a long time ago. And she writes, you were mean to me 2 months ago on the cruise. No. I know she went through some rough times, but being nice is important and treating people with kindness is important. And I also know that she has friends now who love her and watch out for her, which makes me think she must be a good friend back to them. I'm glad for that. But the thought of living in the same house again with her and staff made me feel anxious. She also didn't want to live in the house because she didn't want to live with Robin. She didn't trust Robin. So in an interview today, Christine was speaking to Sarah Fraser, and the interview doesn't really talk very much about the book. So there wasn't a ton in the book addressed or the issues with Meri, but Christine did make an interesting comment to Sarah, and she said that once she cuts someone off and the relationship is over, it's done. There's no going back. There's no forgiveness. There's no trying to mend fences. Once you've burned a bridge with her, you're out of her life. And that was in respect to her ever forging a relationship again with Meri. And she said, absolutely not. And the same with Cody and Robin, obviously. And that made me think about how with her aunt, Kristen, who was advocating for Christine to get out of polygamy, just wanted Christine to have a good life, was doing work to help victims of polygamy. And it just made me realize, like, part of the reason why Christine will never talk to her again is because I think Christine views Kristen still to this day as someone that attacked her family and exposed things that Christine wasn't ready to see or feel or hear. She said on the show it was because it was hard for her to be public and, Kristen was attacking her family. I mean, Kristen was fighting for laws to help women and children free themselves from this. She has spent years advocating and helping people leave polygamy. She has provided safe homes for people. She has worked tirelessly with nonprofits to work with lawmakers. She has worked with women and gone to help them with legal funds. She has counseled women and worked with women as like just a mentor and a friend and a support when they're going through divorces. She is someone that is the kindest heart and just really cares about women not being hurt. And Christine viewed that as something malicious. And it just makes me sad that now that she's out, she still can't see the harm of what polygamy is, because in the book, she doesn't see the harm the way that you and I would see it. And she is still upset about some of the laws, and the felony still exists. And she takes an approach that, we'll talk about that in another video about how the law changed, that's just out of sync with what you and I would think of for being good for society. And it just made me sad because it made me realize, like, she wants to help other women, but then she also can't see that when other women tried to help her, she like viewed that as, you're trying to harm me. And there's still that programming of that fear from the cult. I don't expect her and Meri to ever be friends. I think she recognizes that they were in a very tough situation. She, at the end, says, she and Meri had a moment where we both were able to hug and say we loved each other. And she says she's happy for Meri as she finds happiness in her new life. And that's really all she wants for Meri. I think in 10 years, a book from Christine would be very different. And I don't know, maybe we'll get one, who knows? But yeah, the book is out on the shelves. She's so far only done one interview. She's doing some public book speakings where she's having like a book event where people can get their book signed, but there hasn't been a ton of interviews yet thus far that have been released. So that's why Meri and Christine fell out, because of Meri's control and taking things out on her and her kids. So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.